Soren, welcome.
Hello.
It's good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
Yep.
I'll do a quick introduction. I'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. It looks like something that would be fun to read very fast. Soren holds a master's and bachelor's degree in software engineering from Concordia University in Montreal and has a background in artificial intelligence. He's self-taught in philosophy, psychology, and ethics, interested in neuroscience and Buddhism, and in the relationship between inner subject reality and outer subjective reality, and an environmentalist, an anti-speciesist, an egalitarian, and an anarchist. A social activist, and believes that love is the most powerful engine in the pursuit of alleviating suffering, his main ethical priority, and strives to create bridges and partnerships between social change groups with diverse approaches. And he's co-founder of Vegan Option Canada and an active member of the Organization for the Prevention of Intense Suffering, of the Algosphere Alliance. And he's a community organizer of Animal Rebellion Turtle Island. That I've never heard of the Organization for the Prevention of Intense Suffering, but what a great title. And you mentioned that as part of your mission in life. So I know you've got a lot of different disparate ideas that you want to pack together into a presentation.
Absolutely.
And I'll turn it over to you so you can get to work on it.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Ray, and thank you very much for having me, Silas, and giving me the chance to talk about some of these principles and ideas that I've had on my mind for quite a while, and I've never had a chance to share before. So this is the first time that I will. So it should be interesting. I will try to link them with some personal principles that I've learned by being part of Animal Rebellion. So to continue, I will separate my talk in 4 parts, and I will discuss why I think that achieving unity is important, why by self-organization. I will talk a little bit about theory and history of self-organized system as I understand it. And finally, I will mention some limitations of everything that I have said and am saying today. And then we'll go to the practical principles and see self-organized system, how I've understood that they're being used in Animal Rebellion. So the first question that I'd like to ask is, why? Because more often than not, when we try to achieve change, we do so without having a clear objective on why we are doing it. And we often feel that it is implicitly obvious. And most often than not, even when we do ask the question why and we have an answer, our first answer is not the real answer, and it's sometimes relevant to ask the question more than once. So that's what I will do now, and as we embark on this journey and on this path, I'll try to go to and ask this question repeatedly. So my first instinct tells me that unity is required in order to. It is desirable because separation causes rivality, and rivality causes competition, and sometimes it is. Many argued that competition is not bad. I feel that it is done so because of natural fallacy, because it's present in nature, and because of a misinterpretation of survival of the fittest, or perhaps because our technological breakthroughs, or some people feel that our technological breakthrough cannot happen without competition, or that competition was responsible for it. And I do not want to challenge any of those perspectives. Perhaps they were appropriate in the past, but what I feel is that competition leads to win-lose dynamics. And moreover, those who manage to to win at the current game of short-term self-interest in which our system is at this point. And I think that we are here due to evolutionary forces, which Darwin described very well, such as mutation and natural and sexual selection. Those who win and rise to the top do so by the exploitation of others. And the problem I see with that is that from generation to generation, inequalities have increased to levels that we have never seen before in any kind of like nature or in any kind of past. Like, it's so easy to find today one single human that has more than 1 million times the political power and the economical power of another human. And this has never been seen before in like that. There is no one lion that is 1 million times more powerful than another lion. And the imbalance that it causes, if we mix all of this with the great technological power that we have today, such as CRISPR and nuclear weapons and drones and I would say like industrial farms and sea travelers, the risks that we are having today for astronomical suffering and extinctions are now extreme. In fact, I would say that we are now already through an S risk. We're already experiencing more suffering than ever before. And I believe that we are rapidly approaching possible self-termination due to multiple causes related to climate change, ecosystem collapse, pandemics, nuclear war, and that's just to name a few. So I feel, in fact, I consider that at this point, we have reached a bifurcation in our evolutionary path. And we have a choice to make if we continue on the path that we have gone, or we go towards something different by transcending our competitive spirit and our egotistical instincts, and which we don't, I'm not saying we all have it, but it has been there. So, and in fact, I would say that it is, I said that it was a choice, but actually I think that it is no longer a choice. Given the fact that collapse is inevitable in one direction, I believe, and I have great hope, that we are actually going towards utopia and towards something better. And this isn't just my just my thinking. So what I'm sharing here is a quote. It's a citation by one of my favorite thinkers, Buckminster Fuller. I will not read it, but I will give a little bit of time. As we see, that's where I got the utopia or oblivion quote. Finally, I would like to also spend a bit of time about an issue that I think is very important, and where I think that unity is very important, and it is somewhere where I believe that our society is greatly failing, and us too, and me too. And that is that today's sense making is incredibly complex. And I believe that it is complex because for multiple reasons. I believe our sense making is now broken. And I think that it is because so far we've managed to make sense of the world due to reductionist models, by reducing our thinking to a one simplified model of reality. And we also use collective thinking, which is good. However, I have this impression that in the past, every time humanity has solved a problem, it has created other ones. And that is because in order to make complex decisions, which need to take into account all of the future side effects, we need more than one brain. Just to understand the complexity of the political, economical, and cultural dynamics we live in today, one brain is generally not enough, no matter how good that one brain is. There were some studies in the 80s by Thomas Launder, and I mean, if we believe his research, like he found out by estimating the capacity of knowledge that one human accumulates through a lifetime, and he said it's 1 gigabyte. On the other hand, the good news is that thinking is a social process. The bad news is I don't feel that we have managed to scale up the process of collective thinking and coherent sense making enough to actually solve all of our problems or just start thinking about it. And since everything has more than one side, I believe that it is made worse by the fact that we are constantly being manipulated, and it's, be it our desires, be it our content, be it we are either like manipulated as consumers, we are either manipulated as voters. And I added here a citation by Edward Bernays, who is considered the father of propaganda in the United States, and who was also Sigmund Freud's nephew. I have learned of him, and I highly recommend the movie Century of the Self, if no one has seen it. And in our days, however, I believe this is even worse due to the fact that our social tools, our social technology are making this manipulation even worse. Like without actually having a bad intention, driven by the incentive of just making profit, they are effectively causing that the reality we see has nothing or is very little coherent with each other's reality, and it's very far from anything that we would consider closely related to the truth or some kind of like truth. In fact, like I had it here like that. If we think about it, like the Facebook feed that I will see, like I'm a vegan activist, it will be very different than the Facebook feed that a Trump follower will see. And this just keeps us in this loop of like believing a reality which is not like, it just enforces my own thinking or it enforces someone else's own thinking. There's a very good movie that just came out on Netflix, The Social Dilemma, which I recommend. And problems that I see with this is that it leads to an epidemic of false beliefs, polarization, and aggressivity, and multiple factions that are now competing in a cultural and narrative war for and I fear that this maintains an us versus them culture, and it maintains a narrative of allies versus enemies, and divides the world into like victims and oppressors. And I fear that this is not a fertile ground for effective social change. I have this intuition that it augments hate and it augments suffering. So what I believe is that instead of trying to manipulate people's views to come to our own conclusions and be a winner in this like cultural and narrative war, what would be more appropriate would be to, if we find a way to help people make sense of the world. That's why I added this slice, and I give them the sovereignty to actually understand what is happening and make their own choices so that we can effectively all participate in the co-creation of the world. And I'll have one final argument for unity, and it's an argument with two sides. My argument is that we are already united. The first part of it, that it is that we are united externally. Like I put a little picture of me in the center because I am part of this cosmos. I am made of the same atoms that make up the trees and the animals, the water, the rocks, and there's no fire of life inside of me without the water and air that I breathe, because the ocean and the forests are there to like clean it for me. So just if we, for one split second, I look outside of my own little self, I realize that because of interconnectivity, we already are all one. So we're already united. It's just we don't know it yet. And I added one more slide, which is for the other side of this argument is like, yes, we are connected outside. I also believe that if we look internally and we just reflect internally, we will also realize that our sense of identity is not as fixed as we believe. So I like this concept of illusion of the ego, which is the belief that I do not have a stable and unchanging identity which is separate from everything else. From this story that I am separate from everything, that is a narrative that I grew up with. I believe that it is a mirage, like the water that we see in the desert. And it is something that I came to the conclusion of by, well, I mean, like this story is something that philosophy, it's a question that philosophy raises, like by the ship of Theseus. Like, for example, we can ask the question, if we have a ship and we slowly replace the parts one by one, at the end, is it the same ship or isn't it? It is also a question that has been raised by Buddhism and many other religions and spiritual practices, which figure out that suffering, once again, is one of the greatest noble truths, and that suffering exists, but not the one that suffers. And finally, I feel that we live in an age that neuroscience has caught up to this reality. And in fact, like this Anil Sil, he's a computational neuroscience who has a great talk on YouTube and who's done studies. And he says that by studying how our brain like figures out reality, he says that basically we just hallucinate it all the time. I won't go more into this, but everything that I'm covering a lot of subjects which are a little bit like maybe out there, but everything will be afterwards given on my site with more references. So now, why do I like to talk about self-organized system to achieve unity? Well, once again, it is because of complexity. Like the world is incredibly complex. There are just so many like patterns and so many things that need to be taken into account that in fact, self-organization simply emerges over time. In fact, it emerges because it is already present in nature under many, many forms, like in the cosmos, in the forests, like in many social life forms. Like all of this are examples of actual self-organizations in nature. So I'll now jump a little bit into the theory of a particular self-organization structure. So first, I'd like to, well, I mentioned before that it's present in nature. And we see here a forest, and I'd like to say a forest is it's not an organism, but it is an adaptive system that, although doesn't have, so it doesn't have agency, it doesn't have a membrane, it doesn't have any kind of like centralized information system, but it does manage to achieve some kind of balance by homeostasis. So this is an example of organization in nature. Like we can go further, and what this picture here is a picture of a slime mold, of slime molds actually. Slime molds are tiny little unicellular mechanism that I'm sorry for the noise. I'll try to talk more in the microphone. Okay, so slime molds are small unicellular mechanisms that generally spend most of their time alone. However, they come together under stress, and they actually develop a membrane, and then they achieve internal coherence and no more internal competition, and they become a super organism, an organism made of many other organisms. And they do still have competition with the outside world, but no more competition internally. The communication is achieved by chemical communication. Finally, we can, I've jumped a few evolutionary steps. And if we look at any complex organism, like human being one, I could have taken like another mammal. Like here, now, what we have is a lot of like cells who are autonomous, who are grouped and organized together into tissues, who are organized into organs, who are organized into organ system, who are finally made up of the organism. And there is very high coherence. There is practically no competition internally. There is bottom-up organization, which means that each cell is independent in itself, and each cell lives by itself. And we also have like the organs and the systems which are autonomous, and we also have top-down and centralized intelligence. Like for example, if we have a human that's in a coma, he will still be alive, and all those systems will be functioning, but some other functions will not be available. So this is another example of self-organization. And also very interestingly, I wanted to mention like the first line, which is so I was talking before, and the reason I'm mentioning this, because I will refer back to when I said there's so many perspectives on the world and we do not know which one it is, and they're all in competition, and it causes like polarization. Well, in the body, the eye has like a certain vision, and the ear has something else, and they all put some input within the brain, and those are in parallax. They are not in competition. And parallax means that those different perspectives, although they're different, come together into a greater understanding of reality, of a greater understanding which helps the organism to make sense. So, and that being said, the question we ask is like, what organization would be appropriate for our social structure? And our social structure, I mean, well, us humans, like which one would be appropriate for our political systems, for our corporations, for our non-profit organization, for our social change movements? And we will explore just one example. I would like to mention at this point that many of these ideas that I am exploring from complex systems and much of these discussions I've taken from I've been inspired by a thinker named Daniel Schmackenberger, so I'd like to give credit where it's due. So yes, this question, can we find an organizational system that is appropriate for humanity? Can humans come together and no longer be in competition with each other, but actually become in one way or another part of what we could call an organism? We are already like we already have some organizational structure with which we are already collaborating. Like, I mean, we have been doing this for all our history. Otherwise, we would not be here. So like, we started off, like, history tells us, or my understanding of history tells me that we started off in tribes of up to like 100 people, but now like we've managed to collaborate in numbers way higher than this. Yuval Noah Harari tells us that this is due to the way that we share narratives and share stories. Religion probably played a great help. But to look just at some shapes of organizational shapes, like the one that we grew up in is the one here on the left, like the organization. So the organization, which is like a top-down structure, is the one that we most know of. In a corporation, we generally have the CEO, and right under we have like the vice presidents, and right under we have the managers, and right under we have the employees. There's different models of organizations and coalitions among organizations. Like this top-down model, this hierarchy, is applied in schools, where we have like in schools we could maybe have like the organization that's here showed as an email list, like such as like we have the teacher at the center, and he just communicates everything to everybody else. It is the same thing, or it used to be the same thing with our mass media, our television. Like someone would communicate and everyone would just like receive. There would be like no participation, no like sending it back. And what I would like to look at today is a different system for how we could organize ourselves, okay? And it is inspired by holarchy. Now, holarchy is actually a model of reality. So we've already seen this, and I have sort of been talking about this a little bit all till now when I was showing some of, for example, when I was talking about the body, and I was showing how cells are organized into like tissues, who are organized into organs. So holarchy is this notion, and it's actually just a model of reality. It is this notion that everything is made of parts who at the same time are also wholes. So holarchy comes from the word holon, which means whole, everything together, and added with on for atom. So it tries to like bridge the gap between everything and parts. These two dichotomic views of realities, which is that there is everything that is all one, but everything is also just like can be broken down to its part. So the first one who termed this was Kostler in his book Ghost in the Machines. Like, I'm not going to read the citation here, like this is what he first said. It's also very much used by integrative theory and Ken Wilber, for those who are like aware of him, like who tells us that the world is not composed of atoms or symbols or cells or concepts. It is composed of holons. Now, to get to self-organization, on top of holarchy, there is, well, through time, like there's an organizational model that has been created called holacracy. Holacracy, like democracy, but holacracy, which is another level of sociocracy. So some people are not, if people aren't aware of what holacracy is, well, sociocracy, it is a type of sociocracy, but which is mapped on the model of reality of holarchy. So basically what we have is that there is no more top-down structure. What we have is that we have an organization which has a purpose, a reason why it exists, which is determined by asking the question why a lot, like I did at the beginning of this talk. And it has a constitution, like a country, like, and authority resides mostly with that, not mostly, but only in that constitution. There are, everybody else, all of the people have roles, and they are grouped into teams. Each role will have accountability and purpose, and we shall see a little bit. I'm not going to say more about this, but we will talk a little bit about it later when I will go a little bit deeper into some of the principles. And finally, what has happened is that holacracy has been developed into an open, self-organized system approach by many social change movements who are trying to use it in order to scale up, because in a social change movement where there's a lot of people, it's very hard to motivate people in a hierarchical way. It's very hard to maintain this structure, which is only maintainable by paying people. While in a social movement, people have to be autonomous. People have to be there because they want to be there. It is like the open self-organized system are a little bit more flexible and autonomous and democratic than holacracy, who is meant more for a corporation. And it is into this model that we are going to dwell a little bit deeper. First, I just wanted to spend like a few minutes on the limitation slide, who maybe should have been the first slide that I should have had, which says that everything that I've talked about and everything that I will talk about, I mean, it is just my perspective, and I'm discussing very complex notions. So it is a journey. It is not, it's not something that I say, this is how it is, and you have to like believe it. I'm just saying this is just one possibility. Everything I've said is just some possibility, something to like make us think about. And I'm fully aware that due to time limitations, it's oversimplified, and I've avoided a lot of nuances. We can discuss a little bit of them if there are questions. So now I shall discuss some practical principles from, as I've learned them as being part of Animal Rebellion. Now I will just stop for 1 second here to give a little bit of history. We can see some flags in the background, which are the flags of Extinction Rebellion. And then in the picture, we see like Animal Rebellion. So Extinction Rebellion, like I'm sure everybody knows, but just like in one phrase, it is this movement that has started maybe like 2 years ago, and in UK, London, which would like to achieve, to bring more awareness to the environmental cause by using methods of nonviolent disruption and sacrifice. And it has achieved what some described as great gains at the very beginning. Like, I'm not sure how it is at the very beginning, like it has expanded very fast and achieved a little bit more than other movements that who seemed to have stagnated for a little bit. And Animal Rebellion is, well, around the Extinction Rebellion, this rebel alliance has been created with a lot of movements that come in, and Animal Rebellion are the ones that are providing, in solidarity with Extinction Rebellion, the disruptions and the rebellion, which says that now we need a plant-based food system. Like in order to achieve, I mean, there cannot be a climate emergency without an animal emergency, because it is like an animal emergency, and because we cannot get to, we want to raise awareness to the fact, like Animal Rebellion wants to raise awareness to the fact that we cannot think about avoiding the environmental collapse without actually addressing the animal emergency and changing our habits. So I won't talk much more about that, but now we're going to go into the way that it has been organized. So the first question that we will ask is hierarchy and consensus. Okay, I have mentioned before pyramidal system. So if I were to ask, when has hierarchical system worked for us in the past? Like, what benefits do they have? I could wait and get answers, but this time I'm just going to like give you what I believe it is, and we can discuss later, like if you see other ways where it has worked. So hierarchical systems are effective. When we work under a certain hierarchy, when we have a boss, he tells us what to do, and that's how things are have been achieved in the past. And it's also simple and well known. It's just what we grew up with. So it is a very simple model, which probably it is why it's effective. On the other hand, it does have some disadvantages, which particularly apply to movements, and that is that it is very demotivating. It's quite demotivating to be told what you do. Like, I for once never liked it. And also, like, it is also like voices, choices, and perspectives are lost. When we are in a movement, when something that scales up, like the force and what I was talking about before, like making sense of the world and like achieving coherent sense making, we cannot achieve coherent sense making if we lose perspectives. It doesn't mean that all of the perspectives are good. Like, you know, some of the perspectives can be bad, but like it's good to like go at least into like try to think, why is that person thinking that? How has he achieved that just how is he achieved this train of thought? So if we ask the second question, which is, if we forget about the hierarchy and we just think about a flat system where everybody has a voice, well, at first it's quite satisfying because everyone participates and it's like 100% democracy, like nothing goes forward except everybody agrees. It is satisfying at first, and every voice is heard, so that is good. On the other hand, it doesn't really, it's a little ineffective because it doesn't really scale up. And I said satisfying at first because after a while, it can be quite frustrating to try to get everyone to agree. So therefore, the self-organized system that I have mentioned before are an attempt of a hybrid approach, an approach where we can harness the group's wisdom as well as the individual speed and initiative. We can also ask the question, do self-organized system even need rules? Like, aren't they supposed to just like self-organize themselves and have no structure? And the reality is actually no. Like, we need more structure for self-organized system because there is no human beings being social animals. We do not actually structure ourselves in a structureless way. So whatever happens, like even in anarchist systems, we still have a kind of structure and a way that we discussed. That could be like our family dynamics, our friends dynamics. So instead of, and since we have been growing with some dynamics of how we organize ourselves, which might not be the best ever, instead of reproducing them, it is better to like put them and clarify them down. There is, I added this quote. So this quote is here because it is in the first feminist movements that they tried to have no structure, and then they've discovered the tyranny of structurelessness. There is an article by Joe Freeman that I will have in the references about what happens when we try to not have a structure. And now we shall go into the 6 principles of self-organizing system, which are the building blocks on which we can build to have our self-organizing system. So this is the first one. And in order for a movement or for more than one person to do something together, they do need to share a common goal. So they need to have an agreement on what they work in and on how they do it. There's a flock of birds behind here, because if I were to ask, how do those flock of birds manage to fly together, or though they're like a big swarm, it is because they follow some simple rules. I'm not saying that they're doing it intentionally. I don't know why they do it, but I do know that they go in one direction and they don't collide with each other. So there are some forces which make them go into one direction and make them not collide with each other. So I know that if we want to do something similarly, then we do need a direction, and we need simple rules that we're not going to collide with each other. In the case of animal rebellion, that is our demands, and those are our principles and values. For any other organization, it can be something different. The second principle is the one of consent decision-making. So I mentioned before, when I was talking about top-down and about consent, and I said, well, like one is effective, but the other one is every voice is heard that is ineffective. So a workaround is, instead of trying to get everybody to agree, what we do is we ask, does anyone have an objection? Because that is a more effective way to actually make decisions in which everyone is involved. This can be done in different levels of scale. Like, for example, we could have some kind of we could have like an online consent decision making. In fact, like it was mentioned before, that I'm involved with an organization called the Algosphere Alliance, who has this mission to organize alleviation of suffering in the world. The way the decisions are made there is that each month there's this thing called an agora, and each month everybody can add their proposals to that agora by just sending an email, and afterwards it is sent to everybody, every member, and they have the choice to raise an objection. If an objection is raised, then what we do is there a discussion in short, in order to make sure that the decision is made based on the best arguments. Like this is very much against majority vote, okay? Because majority and democracy, like I think it was like Winston Churchill or someone who said, democracy is the worst government we've ever had, except every other one. But he actually did say it's the worst government we ever had, because majority isn't necessarily always a good thing. Like either the majority makes the ethical choice, let's say, like, I mean, either majority is right. What I mean is that whatever happens, like the majority will cancel some voices, and it's not necessarily that those voices that are canceled are the ones that are not right. This has been seen in the history, and it's seen now. Like best arguments, in our case, veganism, are not being heard at all in a majority situation. I'll go further. Okay. The third principle is distributed authority. So another, when people think about self-organized systems, they believe there's no structure, then they believe that there's no power. And that is not true. There has to be power, because first of all, just as a movement, we need to have power. We need to forget that we don't need power. We do need power in order to like achieve some kind of change. Any kind of like power needs to achieve some kind of change. And then we do need power to make decisions. So like within the movement itself, we do need to be empowered to make the decisions in order to do our everyday activities. The problem with power is that generally is badly distributed, like very, very high levels of inequality, as I was saying before. So power is essential, but it must be distributed across groups and roles. And one way to do this properly, one day to do it that has been tested in self-organized system is that when we make decisions within teams that affect that team, it is the ones that do the work that get to make the decisions. Okay. I will now talk about, before when I was talking about holacracy and self-organized system, I mentioned that there's something called roles, and each role, basically no person, there is no CEO or VP, everybody has a role, and a role exists because there's a necessity for it. So if it's kind of like in an organism, if the organization has a purpose, in order to achieve that purpose, there's things that are required that need to be done. Like we need accounting, or we need a website, and therefore a role will be created. Okay, so now we need a website. We have a website designer, website, yeah, and that website designer will have a purpose, make a website. So like the purpose is what will that role achieve? And this is just a role, and many people can switch it. It doesn't mean, it's not like, it isn't something that, it is not a position for which we hire something. It is a role that emerges from the team, okay, and who someone fills. And it can be someone else, which is also good because people can rest. So if you are tired of doing the same thing always, you can switch roles within your team, within like the whole organization. And the other difference with mandates is accountabilities. Like in a hierarchical structure, we are accountable to our immediate boss. In a self-organized system, we are accountable to everyone. But in order to be accountable to everyone, it needs to be written down very clearly. What are we accountable for? What is our responsibility? What do we aim to achieve, for everyone to like read? So in the previous slide, I talked about power and how it has to be like distributed. Like the mandates and having the purpose and accountability makes it very explicit so that everybody knows what they are doing and why. Another very important concept is communication, because since we have roles for which we do not actually hire, we need, sometimes someone will occupy a role. For example, I said, like, if I'm tired, I will give my role to someone else. Well, then I can like maybe a little bit coach him, but he can also ask me for advice. So if we exchange roles, or if someone takes on a role because we figure we need a new function, we're going to like put videos on YouTube, and there's no one in an organization who has ever done that before, well, he can ask advice. Who does he need to ask from advice? For those who has expertise. There might be someone in the organization, and if we don't have someone in the organization, well, we can go on the outside, like in the outside network. We can ask friends, families, and it's like we ask those with expertise. So there is advice that can be asked. And also, what we also need to keep in mind is that it's good to ask for advice also those who are affected by the decision. Because I said decisions are made by those who do the work, but then again, those decisions does affect people. So if it is possible, it's good to also ask the advice of those who will be affected by the decision. In the case it affects everyone, then we need to ask the advice of everyone, or use a process of decision. In fact, different levels of decision can be used. Like for this, like I could give an example, for example, for a direct action where there are some people who are doing the support and other people who are going to get arrested. Well, like the ones who are organizing the support and who are making some decisions, like, I don't know what food, what refreshments to give to those who are going to be, well, they could ask their advice. Like, and obviously advice means taking it into account. And there's obviously some conflicts that can arise, and we do need to use our better judgment. And if there are controversial proposals, like discuss them. The final and yet very, very important concept is transparency. So when I was discussing before about the mandate and about the roles, all of this is generally stored into an organizational chart, which which can be easily available and served by everyone. For self-organized system, we can use one of the tools that can be used is Glassfrog from Holacracy One, the ones that have assembled this the concept of holacracy together. And this is important because it shows our mandate, what I was saying before, what is our purpose, what is our accountability. It shows others like what work we are doing, and not having things hidden, not having things behind closed door breathes trust. And trust is one of the most important things that we can have. Like, I mean, this is one of the point that when I coach for self-organized system, I put a lot of accent on trust, because it is probably the single-handle most important factor in keeping our organization together. And trust is based on good relationship, and it's based on transparency as well. All of those 6 principles, well, can stand by themselves, or they can be used. So like, we can probably build, using all of those or some of those, we can build our self-organized system and let it adapt. So we can build our team. We haven't covered how information goes, and we haven't much discussed how decisions that affect multiple teams happen. So we will look into that. So for example, let's assume that we have a team that talks about food. There is in this food an internal coordinator, or a role called internal coordinator, whose purpose is to make sure that the purpose of the food team gets achieved, among other roles that he might have. He also is the one that is receiving information from the outside. So we can think about him or her, or when it was like the internal coordinator, as the on the membrane of this cell. If this would be a cell, there would be an intake. So the internal intake coordinator, kind of. And then there will also be an external coordinator. So that is to make sure that all of the voices within this team are well listened to and represented. So the external coordinator does sit in this team, but he will also sit on the outside team, as we will see. And his particular purpose is to make sure, as I said, that all voices and all of the opinions are properly represented so that nothing is lost. So there's like, there can be different teams, like we can have like a music team, a venue team, and all of these external coordinators will have like another group who will be part of the purpose of why venue, food, and music are doing. And this other team will also have its own internal and external coordinator. And it is like this that it is possible to do the scale up. On the other hand, there are some rules that we need to like, or some suggestions we need to like think about when we think about the scale up. And that is that, well, first of all, like the same person can be in more than one team, like the same person can have more than one role. The other thing is the maximum number of people in one team. And depending on what we try to achieve, past 7 people, we are starting to like lose effectiveness, and definitely no more than 10. Like we can see here the number of lines it represents. So it represents the number of relationships between people. And when I said before that trust is important because in a system like this, what holds the system together is not just its purpose. In fact, it is the relationships. Like a regular organizational chart, in a regular organizational chart, everyone has, sadly, a purpose and an incentive, which is to make money. And that is sort of like what keeps the organization together, making money, profit. But this In this, what keeps the organization together is the human authentic relation. So within one team, it is trust and those relationships that keep it together. And those relationships need to be entertained. And if we go past a certain number, then there's going to be so many relationships to be entertained into like one team that we will spend more time entertaining the relationship than actually spending it on the purpose of that team. So we don't want to do that either. Like we want to do like a certain balance. And I have completed my my presentation. I would like to thank you very much. There will be more information as well as the slides. Oh, sorry. I will add the slides, and so the slides are will be available on my site with a bit more of what I have said today, and I'll add more resources and references. And if there are any questions, I am ready to receive them.
Wow, that was great. Did you plan it for your 1 hour presentation for half an hour? Because you did it right about to the minute.
Just worked out like that.
All right. You could have pretended and claimed accuracy and expertise. And there's so much expertise. It's so great to see so many different ideas brought together in the same spot. You know, it's really going to help a lot of people see what they like and don't like about the organizations that we represent, and what we want to do with our own action. And so let's see if people have some questions for you.
Thank you, Soren. I've added your slides link to the Trello card. And thank you for all this. Clearly, you have thought deeply about this. And it comes through. I'm so glad that you're part of this movement. You know, that,
Thank you.
yeah. The question I had about asking for objections in order to achieve some form of consensus.
Yes.
Wouldn't that basically exclude those who may be not as forward in coming up with objections, but who may think about it later? And
Yes, that is a very good point, and it could happen. There, it's not like this isn't the only way to like make decisions. So, in fact, for Animal Rebellion, what I know is that we actually have many ways of making decisions, because I didn't go into much details here because I did have like the time to respect, but there are, like, for example, one of the very important decisions that we make is how do I assign a role, right? Like that is like, you know, when a new role has to like pop up, that is an important decision. Okay. And for that one, we want absolutely everyone's participation. And then we use a process which is called integrative decision making. Okay. In which there is a bit of consent, but there is a whole process of how it is done. So someone makes a proposal. Okay. And then the next step is that everybody asks clarifying questions, and the proposer answers them. Then everybody shares how they feel about it. Okay. And when I say everybody shares how they feel about it, this process actually does have to have like a skilled moderator who actually asks everyone, like, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about this? How, and it tries to like balance it out so that everyone like actually does talk and does share what they have, like and it's it's also a little bit of an impersonal process. When you've gone through it a few times, like the governance meeting, which is what I'm describing, it's a little bit of, it becomes almost less personal. And I will come back to this part of like less personal. So people, I hope, and I tend to believe that will come forward and say like what they feel like. It's also, of course, important to have a good culture. That is the second thing that I will also come back to. And after people have said what they feel, which is basically just anything you feel, like you can say, I don't know, I think this is crap. Okay, that's maybe not so good. But afterwards, then we go to the objection, and then we ask that. No, I'm sorry. First, we give the proposer a time to restate his proposal, so that after answering the question and after hearing how everything feels about it, he can say it again. And then we see, does anyone object? And after anyone objects, then what we do is that we start a dialogue, which is, okay, so what would need to happen for you to lift your objection? So like, how would the proposal, so then there's a discussion between the proposal and the objector, which is a dialogos. Like it is not like who wins. It is how can we go forth so that both parties are satisfied? How can we listen to each other so that both parties are satisfied? And this repeatedly happens until the role. And just to like finish those things that I said I would come back to, which was culture. Like I have only described, because there's many roles in animal rebellion, and I'm only responsible of the self-organizing systems. Again, I'm a self-organized system coach. However, animal rebellion also has, and it's very important, a strong regenerative culture, okay, of culture of no oppression, of culture which is where we have like principles and values, which I also mentioned in the first part when I said like a shared purpose. So we do have some rules which breed for a culture of well, I mean, we work hard, but we take time to rest, but also we don't, we do not accept, like everyone is accepted, but not every language is accepted. So like that part is also very important in order to ensure a bit of what you said, but that is just not part of like this particular presentation. Like, and this, in fact, the way that I like to think about it, when I think about it, it's like this, self-organized system is kind of like the structure, right? But then their culture is the blood that has to go through in order to like, communication has to be like non-violent. And there's a lot more than just this. This is just one model. Have I answered the question?
Yeah. Will you be here on Sunday for the reflective panels?
If you
Sunday and Monday, because
absolutely. If you tell me that I should be here, I shall be here.
Oh, thank you, Soren. Now, because there are some proposals we want to make and get some kind of process by which we can arrive at decisions on those proposals.
Okay.
Like UN SDG, the SDG meeting, we're going to propose that SDG 18 be adopted and SDG 8 be dropped.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can be there.
And if you want, I can send you details on that. And
absolutely. Like if you want me there, or if you want anything you need from me, like,
I mean, can you moderate, since you have experience with this, can you moderate that kind of discussion?
I probably can, if you want me to. Yes, I have done this. This is like a bit of the role that I have in similar discussions. I would need to know a little bit before, but not too much, because in fact, it's very good for the moderator of this kind of meetings to be neutral. So I don't need to know all the details. So I don't have like a point of view. Like I just actually go through it. And yes, there's
okay, perfect.
I can share. I mean, well, I can share it here or offline, like the governance, the way that a governance meeting is happening from a holacracy perspective, which describes very clearly that process that I just said. I'll make sure that the resources are available all on the site. They are not there yet. They are on the site of Animal Rebellion structure. So in fact, like,
Rebecca has a question when you're ready.
Yeah.
So these are some. Yeah. Just give me 1 minute. Okay. So I shared one link where I think that we can find everything that I've said, and I'm ready, Rebecca.
Okay. In some groups, I've seen this happen where they say, do you agree? And people do one signal like their hands up. Everybody agrees. Then the next question is, will you support us in doing it? And, you know, the hands are then out. And then the last question is, will you do the work with us? Because some people will be supportive but not being in the thing. And so there's kind of 3 levels. And I wondered if you had heard, or how do you, you know, if you've talked about that.
I haven't talked about that.
About how to move on from the process.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't talked about that. That is another way of making decisions in groups. And sometimes Animal Rebellion or in meetings where I have been, which are very similar, because I've also been involved with Extinction Rebellion at first, that process is used in order to, or a similar process is used to scan the room. So that is like just to see, like, it's kind of like said, let's get the temperature of the room. Like, how does the room feel about this? And you can put your hands higher or lower, or you can do signals like you said, like if you support. And now for the last question which you asked, which is like, would you do the work? Like I'm guessing some people will, some people won't. Like, again, it's like the roles, like if people want to. So that is how I have seen it. That is how I've seen similar processes as the one that you have been talking about.
Thank you.
Related to that, we talk about the sociocracy as where we have rounds where there's people agree, disagree, or safe enough to try. Is there elements of that in what you're describing?
Well,
there were in what Rebecca
described. Yes. Well, as I said, these 6 principles are a skeleton, right? And then I gave for decision making, like this other link, which is a lot of options, okay? And it can be augmented, okay? So that this, what you just said to me, it's kind of like adding more to the skeleton, like more. This is, in fact, like skeleton is not a good term. I'm going to take it back. I'm going to say it's an operating system, okay? And this is more software. All right, so we can add more software to the operating system and more decision-making mechanisms as we go forth, as the needs evolve. And the one you just mentioned with, I am not familiar with, so I haven't seen it used anywhere like within the organizations that I've been a part of. But it sounds like something that's better. Yeah, well, it sounds like something very good. So. Which one?
Because I like Rebecca's better, the one with the hands, because safe enough to try doesn't indicate whether you're actually got buy-in or not. It could represent as, okay, try it, show me it works. Yeah. Which means that they're not going to participate. But that one that Rebecca described was great, because it says, okay, yes, and I'll help you. We'll try to make that work.
Absolutely.
Well, I think also a huge thing tangential to that is what you were talking about in the mandates. What do you need to achieve your purpose? I don't know if I'm going to do a thumbs up if I don't know what's involved. You know, what do I need to achieve that? I'm a hard worker, but what do I need to help me get to that stated purpose?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why there has to be a discussion about this. Like, first we have the discussion of what are we trying to achieve? Why is this necessary? Like, what will be the accountabilities? And then, like, who wants to take on this role? However, these things are also self-defined. So although you said you would not, I mean, you can agree to it without actually knowing everything and then self-define it yourself, say it like what you think you can do. And then later on, because that's the other thing, like, see, self-organize means that it keeps organizing itself as we go forth. So I don't know, like at the next meeting, or you can say, I have a conflict. And a conflict is not a bad thing, or a tension. A tension is just a difference between what you perceive that is and what should be. So we could say something like, well, you know, like this is too much for me. This purpose, like I cannot do it. Like it's just like, in fact, this is enough for, like, you know, we need another role. And then you make the process starts again. Like I cannot do this, and you make, I propose there's a new role that has to be created. And who's going to take that role, we will see. But you propose that a new role has to be created, and the process starts again. And like perhaps someone will have an objection as we go to the process. No, you know, like, I mean, I don't think that you should. And we discuss with him until, you know, some common ground is achieved so it keeps changing. And then perhaps your purpose will change and become something different. So like you change it to what you think you will achieve. And if you can't, there's the accountabilities, then you say, well, there's a tension. I can't achieve it. That is how I understand it. Like also, you know, as I said in the limitation, all of this is very new, and it is not, when I say all of this is, I mean, our understanding of self-organized system and our practice of them is new. It is not what we grew up with, and it is not what we know what to do. So we often fall back in like different patterns, which is the old patterns that we have learned. And I do that myself all the time, such as like asking for someone to although we have accountabilities, we ask someone, okay, what do you think I should do? It's like, oh, you know, you're accountable. You do what you think you should do. Like, you know, it's your accountability. And okay, but what do you really think I should do? What would you do if you were me? And then, you know, the person is kind of stuck in like, okay, he gives like kind of a suggestion, but that's why we don't have, what I'm trying to say is we do not have the practical know-how of having gone through this long enough. Like even at Animal Rebellion, like we are learning this, and at Extinction Rebellion too, and the implementations are very different in all of the chapters and everywhere. So it's we're still figuring it out. As I also said in the limitation, I do not think that this is the one recipe that will solve everything. I think it's just something to explore, and perhaps just come out of our old model and just see how we can evolve into, you know, how we can achieve what we're really trying to achieve. That's why I spend so much time on unity and on coherent collective intelligence. That's what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to achieve unity. We're trying to achieve coherent collective intelligence, so that so we can take good collective action.
We have other questions? I have some if there's nobody in the queue. My interest is the philosophy and positioning of Animal Rebellion within Extinction Rebellion. You described them as the Rebel Alliance, which I thought was funny because obviously in Star Wars there isn't any sort of cooperation between the rebels and the Imperial Empire, but there is within Animal Rebellion, as I understand, right? It's
yes.
It's more of a spin-off with a focus, more of a focus of a special interest, I suppose.
I wouldn't say it's a spin-off. Now, again, this is just.
Would you say it's a watchdog group within the organization?
Can you repeat the question? Is it a what?
A watchdog group within the organization. This is what I'm hoping.
I don't think that Animal Rebellion is actually part of Extinction Rebellion. It acts in solidarity with it. Like, by my perspective, like it acts in solidarity with it because by ourselves.
Hey, sweetie, I just wanted to say when you enter in, you want to have camera off and audio.
Sounds ironic.
By ourselves, we do not, in fact, it comes back to the theory of change of Animal Rebellion, which is the same theory of change of Extinction Rebellion, which is we need to achieve 3.5% of the population who are active in trying to achieve change. Okay? Now, there is no way realistically that we can think about even now, that that we can achieve 3.5% by ourselves. So in fact, even Extinction Rebellion can't do it. Like they're having trouble. So that's why they're doing the alliance, in order to try to get to that 3.5%. So it is a strategical alliance, right? Like we're asking for the same things because of the strategical alliance in order to try to achieve the 3.5%. And at the very beginning, when I joined Animal Rebellion, which was more than a year or so ago, I also saw it as a way, but this is my personal view, of like not being left behind, because assuming Extinction Rebellion will achieve some change, and let's say they do get, because they ask for a citizens assembly, right? You do not want like the vegan perspective to be forgotten, right? And we're not going to get the vegan perspective there if we don't actually do the work, right? We do need to like do the work. We do need to be in the streets. We do need to like rebel alongside them so that we can say, hey, but this is like how I was seeing it a year ago. Now it has evolved a lot. And some people see it as but some of our members, like there's a talk on Vegan Options Canada site when we did a seminar, who someone from Animal Rebellion New York said and compared Animal Rebellion with the moral conscience of the rebellion. So there's also an article on open democracy that you can share, and I can probably find for you if you would like.
When I did that hand motion of reversing it around, I wanted to say that was to indicate that you said that they're trying to achieve 3.5% of public approval and participation, and veganism is inhibits that. You introduce a vegan agenda, and then all of a sudden there's a huge demographic who goes, oh, I'm out. And we just know that this is part of our culture. There's this, what Melanie Joy calls carnism, that makes people very likely to make their decisions based on their attitude towards veganism, when it's maybe not even in their best interests. So I would suggest that there's to prevent that being an issue, Extinction Rebellion has perhaps a deferral of decision making. We're going to achieve break this power structure that makes all of our decisions about climate change and our existential crises. And that power is going to go to citizens' assemblies, and we'll choose the experts, will know what to do next, and won't be influenced by industry, and they'll make the right decisions. So they will be the decision makers. So we don't need to make those decisions now. Is veganism going to be part of that picture? And I'm hoping Animal Rebellion is there to make sure that when it's time to decide what exactly we're doing once we get the power, that agriculture is going to be part of the narrative, which it definitely is not now in Extinction Rebellion for those political reasons. Does that all sound?
Yes, of course, it sounds correct. I think it is, as you said, it's a public perspective and public view, which is why it is not there. But we all know that deep down, like, the change cannot happen without it, and I think that Extinction Rebellion knows it too. It's just that. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, you are in a convergence in which the majority is not vegan, but they have allowed the vegan perspective to come in. So it's the first time ever that the Peace Conference has allowed a vegan room, a Veganism and Global Transformation track. So I say that we have finally cracked open the carnism shell, and we are kind of infiltrating in. So it's time to celebrate that, that we are doing something that is, maybe Extinction Rebellion cannot keep pretending it's not there. So some of the things that are happening in this convergence, where we are sort of drilling into the foundations of what is really causing us to keep going down the wrong path, and pointing out what needs to be changed. And those are the kind of discussions we are going to have during the reflective panels on Sunday and Monday.
And it's great that like coronavirus has really wakened people up, and there's so many people on the personal level, they go, yeah, this veganism thing, I can see it's probably somewhere in my future. They're resisting and waiting for a sign, and now the sign has come. When is society going to change? I don't believe it can change. Oh, it just changed right before my eyes. So now I have to rethink everything that I've decided against doing in my life. And that includes just being an activist. That's like, just trusting the government is going to take care of everything. We've had a 4-year program of unwinding that, and everybody has to decide that it's now not time at all for trusting that our governments will take care of things. And I really hope that if there is a change of administration in the United States, that it doesn't go back to, everybody goes back to sleep. We had a great showing the 2 days after inauguration of one of the biggest movements with the Women's March. And then everybody kind of went back to sleep. They put the pussy hat in their closet, and we don't see it again until the next March. That can't happen. We have to be mobilized. And Extinction Rebellion is just like so important in showing that show of force in 2 ways, and one of them they're probably not going to be happy with me saying, but one of them is to show that they haven't been effective. They've been saying, how many people does it take to get arrested to make the front page news? And thousands of people get arrested. And they finally start making it into the news by shutting down 5 bridges in London. That would be huge news anywhere in the world. So obviously the system is defending itself, trying to say, don't talk about this, don't talk about this. They fill up all the jails in London, and they're filling jail cells in the countryside, still not making the news. So shutting down 5 bridges wasn't enough. And coronavirus comes down and shuts down the whole world. And it's still not enough. So I'm not discouraging Extinction Rebellion. I would say we have to start asking, we have to start hearing no until the final yes. So, I mean, there's no going back. We have to keep pounding on that door, but a lot of our current political system, I describe it as a wall with a door painted on it. And we're yelling for that door to open, and it's not going to open. It's not designed to open. We have hired people to grow our economy, and everybody has to understand that we have to break that understanding of the world. The perpetual growth, I think we've got, Sailesh was talking about the donut economics. This is our future. We have to decide, how do we manage the disparity of the world? Those people inside the donut can't even get to the bread part. They're in limbo in that donut hole. So we do need to leverage them out, but we can't use that as an excuse to grow the economy at all costs, because the outside of the donut is the 7 planetary boundaries, and they're all agriculture. 5 of them are like, agriculture is the #1 solution. So how can we ignore that?
Right.
And only one of them is climate change.
Yeah. No, that's why I think this movement is finally acknowledged and let us in the door. So it's now time for us to kick the door wide open, and I mean, I'm noticing that if I go look on the Peace Weekend Facebook page, we have at least 1 out of 3 to 1 out of 4 videos are from our room. And we are getting a lot more views than a lot of the other videos. So, I mean, I think it is having an impact. Okay, even though there are 25 rooms, we have at least, we have about 25% of the videos or more.
I suspect that Roger Hallam, if I expressed what I just expressed now, he wouldn't say no. He would just say, shh.
Well, first
He's
of all,
going for that enough popularity to get people out there. He wants more people in the streets, and I respect that.
First of all, Roger
But
Hallam.
I'm so happy to have Animal Rebellion there.
So Roger Hallam, I don't think he's even with Extinction Rebellion anymore. Like, he's permanently quit it, and there were some I don't know, like that. Like, I think he permanently quit it. He's a vegan, and he has supported from behind the scenes Animal Rebellion, like, all the time. Like, in fact, when I joined Animal Rebellion, like, I personally, like, he helped me out. Like, so he is not, it's just that, again, you know, it's exactly how you said at the beginning, but he really did hope that animal rebellion was going to succeed. But right now he's not even with, so it's not him who controls, like, in fact, like, again, like, it's a self-organizing system. I think that much of that, I came back to this slide because I think it's an important one, and I think it is what is stopping and what's happening in the world is like our sense-making crisis. Like you mentioned, like the United States, or a change of government. What change of government? Where are people going to vote? Like, are they going to vote for Trump? Are they going to vote for Biden? Like, how are they going to like vote? And why would they vote for like Biden? Like, there is absolutely no good argument to do so, except that it's not Trump. So basically, people are now stuck in like two choices, which are completely bad, and also stuck into this dichotomy where no party from the left can come because it's going to take from like the Republicans. No party from the right can come because it's going to take from, so like, I mean, I cannot, and what we've seen in the past from the United States with like the pandemic and how it's affected the United States and everything that's happened, like with Black Lives Matters and like one after the other crises, the fires now that are happening like everywhere. Like, I mean, the United States is the brink of a fall down like never before. And people don't know that because they're not like concentrating on the making sense part of it. And the problem is that United States, like if it falls, like it's not just the United States that falls. Like it's not like, oh, okay, like a new system. No. Like, I mean, the world is now global. We have one global civilization. If the United States falls, like we all fall. The same thing could be said by China. I do not know as much about China and about Russia because it's harder to find out. Everything is just so central, even in my world. Like my own sense-making ability is completely broken, and all I hear about is the United States. So like I try to like learn the politics, but it's not as easy. It's not as easy, even if I try my hardest. That's why I myself, like I do not know what happens and what is true and what isn't anymore, because there are tiny islands where we can make sense, but most of the things where we're trying to figure out what's happening is just not present. And that is why it is being shushed when you said that why like the fact that all of the arrests are being shushed. And it's not even a fact, like, I mean, there's a bit of propaganda and the system trying to protect itself, but it's also just a lot of confusion on all sides and people looking for what they want to look like. There's almost like, I mean, at the beginning, Edward Bernays, that he had an intention, which actually was a good intention. He just wanted to protect what he saw was right, like democracy and what he saw something good. Like he didn't have a bad intention. And now, like all of the social networks, they don't have a bad intention. They do what the shareholder asked them to do. They try to like make money. They like, okay, like and then that transforms us into like products, and manipulates what we see so that we don't even see like what makes sense. And it reinforces my own view, which is like quite bad.
So then we have to end on that note,
great.
And move on to something much more delicious, which is good food. So
thank you for having me.
Stop the live stream and start. My pleasure.
Thanks so much, Soren.
Our pleasure.
So many more questions, but
right.
Thank you.
We'll have to explore them at some other point.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to make Paige and Marlon co-hosts.